Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is a pioneer in the fields of the human biofield, therapeutic sound, and electric health. A researcher, author, inventor, educator, speaker, and practitioner, she has been researching health since 1987 and specifically how sound impacts health since 1996. She is the originator of the sound therapy method Biofield Tuning, the founder of the Biofield Tuning Institute, and the author of the best-selling books, Tuning the Human Biofield, Healing with Vibrational Sound Therapy, and Electric Body, Electric Health. She is also the inventor of the Sonic Slider, the creator of a line of tuning forks and accessories, and the CEO of Biosana, which provides sound therapy tools and training globally. Welcome to the show, Eileen McKusick.
Hi, Matt. Thanks. Glad to be here.
I'm so excited for us to dive in because we started right away talking about Tartaria. I'm so interested in electric health, electricity in general on the planet, because it has to do with absolutely everything, free energy, forgotten history. I think even God, with the patterns and the geometry and everything in between, and also can explain some mysteries. We only get a little bit of the sound spectrum. We only get a little bit of the light spectrum, but it really, when it boils down to it, it all comes back to electricity is what I found anyway. So I'd love for you to share a little bit of your history, your journey, and how you got to do what you're doing today.
Well, I became interested in health and human potential when I was 18 and started reading books. I'm kind of a geek and like to read. And if anybody else, and usually people who watch podcasts with people like you are also curious humans who want to understand life better. I think that what we're taught in school and taught by the media is really just a sliver of truth and mostly falsehoods. And we experience a kind of restlessness inside us that goes, there's more, and I want to find out I want to hear the ring of truth through all of the falsehoods that I've been taught. Because if I believe everything I've been taught, I end up sick, depressed, miserable, and just not all that I can be. And I think many people have that experience. So I took a deep dive into health and human potential. And when you go into these rabbit holes, one avenue leads to another and to another. And in 1996, I'd gotten hip to the concept of vibrational medicine. And I was reading books on these color and sound and music in healing, which obviously resonated for me. And I got a catalog in the mail as I was sort of finishing up my little stack of books that I had. There weren't many to be found back then. Now there's way, way more. But in 96, there was not a lot of resources on the topic. A catalog that I got, a Gaia catalog, had a set of tuning forks for healing in it. And I ordered them on impulse. It was the C major scale. And they came in this little tiny instruction book, and they said use C in the root chakra, D in the sacral center, E in the solar plexus, and so on, B in the crown. And at the time I was doing massage therapy part-time, and I asked my clients if they'd be willing to be guinea pigs. And so I just started experimenting, really not having any kind of clue what I was getting into. And really was so surprised by my experience with the tuning forks. I thought that if I activated a tuning fork that was a note of C, it was going to sound like a C wherever I put it. I thought it was just going to be like an objective tone that was going to provide a tone to people. And what I discovered is that as I moved them around the body, that they would make different sounds in different places. And in the beginning, when I was telling people this, they're like, oh, that's just the Doppler effect. Oh, that's just room acoustics. And I was like, yeah, I get that stuff. But there's something else going on here. And what I didn't realize at the time is that we give off waves. We give off vibes. Everything in your body is in motion. Everything in motion makes waves, and waves propagate. So if you have pain in this shoulder joint and you don't have it in this one, the waves being given off by the shoulder are going to be really different than the waves being given off of this shoulder. If you have sharp pain and I hold the fork there, it sounds sharp. And if I hold it over your other one, it sounds normal. And so I was curious to discover that there was a wave intersection happening between the overtones and undertones produced by the fork and the subtle vibrations coming off of the body. But even more curiously, if you have pain in the shoulder and it's sharp and it's making a sharp tone, if I kept holding a vibrating tuning fork there, after a little while, it wouldn't sound sharp anymore. It would sound like the other shoulder. And the very first time I did this with somebody, they got up off my table and rotated their shoulder and were just like, oh my God, all the pain is gone. And we were both so amazed. Now, neither one of us knew what was happening. There was no expectation. There was no placebo effect. We were just experimenting. And so to have that kind of outcome when I didn't even know what I was doing and I wasn't expecting anything was really surprising. And so I used the forks as a hobby for like 10 years, but this was in Connecticut in the 90s. And when I told people I was doing sound healing with tuning forks, I encountered a lot of skepticism and kind of unkind skepticism, and nobody likes being on the receiving end of that sort of thing. So I was like, I am never going to be like a sound healer because I don't like getting this kind of feedback. I'm like, my clients was one thing. They were like, they'd come back the next week and they'd be like, do that sound thing again. I felt really good after that. And so in very short order, I stopped doing massage and I just did the tuning forks, and I did them as a hobby for 10 years. And, maybe one or two people a week, just out of curiosity more than anything. But I was very certain that this was not going to be my vocation, that I was not going to be the tuning fork lady. I just didn't, I don't see myself as a healer. I didn't want to be a healer. And so I was pursuing other things. But then in 2006, I had something happen in a session that really changed everything. And that was that I had discovered that as I passed the forks over people's bodies, that sometimes it would go really loud. Like sometimes it would go so soft that you could barely hear it. Sometimes it would sound like it was full of static. But sometimes it would get really loud. And I was like, okay, if it's loud, that means there's more energy there, right? And if it's going to be loud anywhere, it should probably be loud over the energy center or chakra. And any place that we have a chakra, we have a nerve plexus. So there's a nerve plexus. Obviously, there's more nerve activity. So that's where it should be loud. And then that's in the midline of the body. So I discovered that I could stick a vibrating fork in these loud spots. Let's say it sounds loud over your shoulder right here. I could stick a fork in it and I could do what I call click, drag, and drop, where I could sort of click into the loud spot, drag it to the midline and drop it. And then it wouldn't be loud over here anymore. It would be loud there. And so that was my little practice. I'd like find somebody's loud on the hip or loud over the liver. And, afterwards people would be like, I feel more centered. and it was useful, and I've been getting people out of pain and discomfort. But on this particular day, I accidentally discovered a loud spot way out here on a woman who was complaining that she had pain and pulling in her jaw, down her neck, and into her shoulder. And she'd had all different kinds of treatments and nothing had helped. And then I found this loud spot. I'm like, wow, why is there a loud spot like way out here? And what do I do with it? Right? And I wasn't really sure what needed to happen, but I'd been bringing everything to the midline. So I was just like, okay, well, I guess I'll just click, drag, and drop it to the midline. And so I did. And it was very quiet over her throat when I started. And when I moved this loud spot in, all of a sudden her throat was really loud and clear, and the loud spot was gone from out there. So then the next day she called me and she said, Eileen, all of that pain and pulling is gone. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. So the next people who started coming in, I started with my tuning forks, like as far away as I could in my room, which was about 7 feet away. And I was amazed to discover, all kinds of stuff. As I was slowly moving through the tuning fork, I was hitting things that felt like walls, like channels, like eddies, like voids. Like there was this whole sort of tonal landscape hidden in plain view around our bodies. And the next 4 years, I started to explore this. I started to have extremely dramatic therapeutic outcomes. People who had anxiety their whole lives were, after 3 sessions, they didn't anymore. People were out of pain. People were reporting all kinds of really incredible outcomes. And I realized that, this is the kind of healing people are looking for, right? I mean, you're not right. You go see some provider, you want them to make you be right. Whatever it is, I'm in discomfort, help get me out of discomfort. And that's what I was doing kind of over and over again. And I realized that I sort of had a kind of moral obligation to bring it out into the world. But I also knew that people perceived it as very woo-woo, very pseudoscientific, very airy-fairy. And I really didn't want to encounter the slings and arrows of snarky skeptics. So I was kind of reluctant to, but I got a download from God very clearly one day that I call my prime directive. And at the time I was making kettle corn. I actually had the first kettle corn in stores in 2004. You could buy kettle corn at fairs and festivals. You could not get it in a grocery store. Now kettle corn is everywhere, right? But in 2004, it wasn't. And so I'm in Vermont and I'm organically oriented. So I started making organic maple kettle corn. I owned a restaurant from age 20 to 32, and I kind of have a knack with food. And so I created this highly addictive kettle corn that people would open the bag and they eat the whole thing. I was like, I got a proven product. It's got a great project. It's got a great profit margin. It's addictive, right?
Yeah, it's natural, so you can eat as much as you want. It's not bad.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, I'm going to blow this up. I'm going to sell it to Frito-Lay and I'm going to retire. Like that was where I was at with that. And so God said to me, Eileen, the world needs harmony more than it needs another snack food. You need to go to college, right? Very clearly. And it came in like certified mail, it's like very laid out. You need to go to college. You need to get degrees. You need to learn and teach about sound. You need to advance the science of this. You need to get into college textbooks, do studies. You need to awaken an army and cover the globe with this work. And I was like, oh, why me? Like, I don't really want to do this. But at the same time, I realized that I couldn't argue, with that directive. And so I sold my popcorn business like that. I enrolled. Just so happened that there was a Northern Vermont University literally 3 minutes down the dirt road that I lived on in the mountains of Vermont, had one of the only undergraduate programs in wellness and alternative medicine in the country. And I was able to enter into that. They also had a master's in education program. So I did my undergraduate, my master's in 5 years, and wrote a master's thesis called Exploring the Effects of Audible Sound on the Human Body and its Biofield, and biofield being the operative word there. Now, when I first started in doing research for this, I was looking in things like PubMed and Medline for peer-reviewed research on the human energy field or the aura. I wasn't finding anything. And I was like, what am I doing trying to write an academic treatise on an esoteric topic? But then I came across the term biofield in a book by Gary Schwartz called The Energy Healing Experiments. And the term biofield was coined by a National Institute for Health panel in 1994 to provide a scientific term for the field of energy and information that surrounds and penetrates the human body. And once I found that, I was able to find enough papers out there for my literature review, and everything started to kind of click together. And I came to see that our bodies have an electrical system that we're not taught about. We've all been really indoctrinated into this chemical, mechanical perspective on life, on health, and on our bodies. And what is missing from our cosmology is plasma, the fourth state of matter, and ether, the fifth state of matter. These states of matter that are light, that are connective, because we've been indoctrinated into a world of darkness and separation. Even our cosmological story, Big Bang, this the idea that there are black holes that suck in light and dark energy and dark matter, and it's all dark and separate and depressing, quite frankly. And so learning about the fact that the body has an electrical system, that it has current running through it. Anything that has electrical current running through it has a magnetic field around it. And the human body is no different. So people get all their their knickers in a bunch about, oh, what's the energy in energy medicine? It's electricity. It's so simple. I don't know how we've been Jedi mind tricked all of these decades into not seeing that and not understanding that. Because, it's sort of like a not seeing the forest for the trees kind of thing, where like most people get that their heartbeat's electric, so certainly get their brain waves are electric. And then, your blood carries a charge, and that your bones are piezoelectric crystals that make electricity when they're compressed by like bouncing on a trampoline or dancing or whatever. Running gives you energy. It's because your bones are making juice. Like it's electric juice. Oxygen, the oxygen molecule has 4 free electrons. And when we breathe in oxygen, we're breathing in light. That's why your blood that's oxygen rich gets bright red, because it has light in it. And it's that light that's getting dropped off at your cells. That is the current. You can go for weeks without food, days without liquids. You can only go a few minutes without breath, because breathing in this plasma air, this free energy that's all around us, it's that electric juice that powers our inner light. And this whole separation of science and spirituality, like, oh, if you have any perception of inner light, well, then that's religious, that's spiritual. But no, it's biological. You have biological light. You have light in your bones, you have light in your fascia, you have light in your brain. You are illuminated when you are alive. When you're alive, your light is on. When you're dead, your light goes out. Right? The body's still there. What's missing? The electrical system, the electrical current, the electrical charge. That's what's missing. And so this whole idea that we have a toroidal electric system, right? So the toroid is like a sphere with a spiral channel down the middle. Anything that has electric current is going to form this. Even a bar magnet with a north and south pole, if you put a piece of paper on it and you sprinkle iron filings, it's going to form the torus of that electrical thing, right? So that is what the sound is working with. I'm working with the body's electrical system, essentially getting the noise and resistance out of the signal. That's the primary thing that I'm doing with sound.
That's amazing. I love the background. I could listen to you talk all day. So there's so many different ways we could go with this. We talked a little bit at the beginning about Tartaria, and we can go down that rabbit hole. But I just want to kind of address, like, when I was in the Shaolin Temple, they knew this too. That's why they do acupuncture. They said, well, any disease is disharmony with the electric body, essentially, and they believe in the ether, right? The Tao, like everything, this energy that connects everything. It's kind of the idea of like fish being in water and not knowing water exists, right? Well, it's connecting everything. Well, we have that here too. And the other thing that I want to bring up was the church windows as well. Like when you look at cymatics, the visual representation of sound, why are there certain frequencies that they make these perfect harmonic patterns? You take those patterns and they match these church windows perfectly. So it does seem like sound and vibration and electricity all have a place here. And it does seem like this knowledge is either being repressed or forgotten about or deliberately deleted, because when you're in a natural harmonic state, you're in a very powerful state. You're also connected with all things. And when you're connected with all things, you can't be controlled, you can't be manipulated. And you have a direct connection with God, the source giving you direction, and so you can't be manipulated or controlled, which is an issue for people who want to do that to you. So I don't know where we go with this. You want to respond to that? And then maybe I'll ask you like 1,000 questions, or, how do we use it? How does a person use it? What are some of the benefits of it? What are the, I could go everywhere with this. So
Yeah, I
just,
know there's a lot to cover. I mean, it really is. It's a very broad, far-reaching topic, and it absolutely ties into Tartaria. So I first kind of fell down that rabbit hole in 2018 and found it incredibly intriguing. But then in the last couple years, I've just gone more deeply into it. I just became obsessed with old world architecture. Like I
oh, wait,
just,
hold on one sec.
ah,
Did you have a fan just turn on?
yes. Let me
Okay.
change my background setting so that
Everyone will hear that. I was like, wait, hold on. I didn't know if it's me or you. So if it can stop, then you're good.
okay. I
Perfect.
just
Much
put,
better.
is that better? Okay, I just put
Yes.
my sound on medium, my blocking.
Perfect.
Otherwise I will freeze to death sitting here.
I don't want that. So if if it's freezing to death or the sound, then the audience can deal with the sound. Okay, sorry, continue.
Okay, so I was like, why am I so obsessed with Tartaria and these videos? Like, I just can't get enough of them. And I think a lot of people have that experience, right? And you're like, oh my God, there's a whole hidden history here, and I just want to know everything I can about it. And with the tuning forks, what we're doing is I guess this is a topic I can go in with you. When we are out of integrity, when we are in fear, when we are, let's say, arguing all the time with our mate, right? What did Bob Marley say? When you fuss and quarrel all day, you're saying prayers to the devil, I say, right? And so our biofield goes out of balance. So when we're speaking truthfully, peaceably, harmoniously, diplomatically, successfully, we come from our center. When we're off and in a place of imbalance and we're speaking and not being heard and we're fighting and yelling, our energy comes out sideways, okay? Especially when we're under pressure, we're under time pressure, we're under money pressure, we start to like come out not in the best version of ourselves. And so these imbalances in our field create food for parasites, for etheric parasites, also physical parasites. If our body isn't in balance, we may have an overgrowth of any kind of yeast, fungus, parasites, that sort of thing. But these are very much a consequence of the state of our energy field, or our mind, right? I always say your biofield is your mind, it's your conscious mind, it's your subconscious mind, it's where all your memories are, it's where all your ancestral inheritances are present there. And so we attract etheric parasites, that they're plasma beings. They're not solid like we are, but they feed on our energetic imbalances. And so what happens is they also will goad us into particular behaviors or engagements that will make us continue to create food for them. All right. And when they become really extreme, this is where suicidal ideation comes from, not from you, but from the parasites that are attracted to you. Now, are they evil or bad or wrong? No, because nature will break down and recycle unviable organisms. The antelope that gets caught by the lion, or anything that is dying or getting low, will start to attract mold and all of the things in life that break down unviable organisms. If your organism is full of light, is full of God, you are in integrity, you are vital, you don't attract these things from nature that are designed to break you down, right? So many humans at this point are riddled with parasites. They feed on different areas, our guilt-driven overdoing, any place where we go out of balance and we're running energy off our bodies and in our fields in an out of balance way becomes, another word for this is loosh, right? That the Wetiko, the mind virus, that these parasites feed on this. When we are riddled with like local parasites, we're more inclined to tolerate larger parasites like the CIA, like the WHO, like the CDC, like the IRS, any of these sort of governmental things that feed on us, that suck the light and life out of us, right? There are many of us who are here who want to be in truth and be in health and be in integrity and realize our potential as human beings. And so we realize that we are being farmed and milked, essentially. And so these parasites that are all over us are part of this. So what I do with the tuning forks is I adjust the energy. I don't look at or touch or deal with or identify the creepy crawlies that are on you. It kind of gross me out. I just take the imbalance in your field and straighten you out. I remove the food source that whatever this is feeding on you. And I help you to become aware of your worthiness of being filled with light and being filled with God, and help train you to stay in integrity, to stay in vitality and viability, so that you no longer attract these parasites. So I saw a meme one day, because of course I started following all these Tartarian people on social media. And it was a picture of the bells, right? So for people who aren't familiar, there used to be huge amounts of bells in all of these towers all over the place. And you can find pictures of them all in like graveyards where they've all been taken from the churches. And do you know that they melted them all down in World War I and World War II and turned them into munitions, which I think is really horrible, like when you really think about it. But in this meme, they said the bells kept the evil spirits away. And I was like, that's what I'm doing with the tuning forks in the field, is cleansing, clarifying, brightening, strengthening, to keep the parasites off you, to keep the stuff that wants to do this, right? As long as you're, nothing's going to come along and go to you. So, they understood the power of sound to keep us in the ring of truth. Right? When you're healthy, like the song of the universe is ringing in your cells. Like you are attuned to the music of the spirits, the music of the cosmos. You are moved by God, by life itself in that natural flow. And like you said, you're much harder to control if you're connected, if you're dialed in to your environment. So somehow, somewhere or another, like these dark forces that are feeding on us, manipulating us and making us miserable because it feeds them, managed to destroy the bells, managed to destroy the history, managed to destroy our awareness of free energy, hid it all, hid the ether, absolutely hid the ether, hid plasma, hid the power of sound. Like all of this has been hidden. And as I've been uncovering it over the years, I'm like, oh my God, there's everything we need to be healthy, to be free, to have free energy. Like it's all already been experienced by humans and it's been taken away from us. And with it, our freedom, our spirit, our health, our playfulness, our power, all of that. And I think now there's a whole bunch of us being like, we got to get this back. We better figure this out and get it back, right? That's what I'm doing.
Well, again, I love all that. There's so many times I want to kind of jump in with analogy, but I just love also listening to you speak. So what came up for me was, very simply harmonic sound. If you think about nails on a chalkboard, you think, oh my goodness, right? You don't feel good. And then you listen to perfect sound and it sounds amazing. And there's a man named Eric Rankin, who's a friend of mine who was on the podcast, and I have the chimes near me and I used to play them for my group all the time, but it's like the bells, they sound perfect and they make you feel good into this very powerful resonance. And when we're talking about these energies, there's a lot of mystical and occult teachings about these energies that we don't see. We only see a very small bit of the light spectrum, a little bit of the sound spectrum, and so on and so forth. So we're only perceiving a very small amount of physical reality. And so the idea of like a parasite on you, there are definitely parasites in your body from food, and that can happen. So you want to be mindful of what you eat. That's one thing. But these spiritual ones are kind of frightening. And on one hand, I've kind of seen going through the let's say festival and out there people, which I am and I was, and maybe I've kind of balanced it out a little bit more. You think like, oh, you like this scary devil kind of guy coming to get you, and he's eating your energy, and it makes you feel like a victim, like, oh shit, I can't see this thing, it's eating me, and there's nothing I could do about it. And so the question I want to ask is like, where where did you come across these, like, the idea of these energies? Because it comes across a few things. I'm just curious where you saw it and why you believe it. Like, they talk about the jinn, and I've had a few people on my podcast just talk about these energies or these spirits. Talks a little bit about it in the Bible, I think, where the one where Jesus sends them to the pigs, and then the pigs go crazy and they go off the cliff. So the idea is, where did you kind of hear that reference? And is it something that you can deal with? Because what I don't want people to think is like, oh, it's this big scary thing, right? When the lights go off and you think about demons or things, you think about the most evil, terrible thing ever, and then it makes you feel powerless. And we want to move into like the God power, and that's what I've seen. Nothing really trumps that connection, like you and your connection with the creator. Nothing, no small thing trumps that power. And so how do we move into that?
Yeah. Well, the way that I first discovered them was by discovering them with the tuning fork. So a tuning fork, as a simple acoustic instrument, produces technically an infinite number of overtones and undertones. And so it is resonating in those levels of reality that we don't perceive in ordinary reality. So because these subtle sounds are present, they illuminate and sort of bring to awareness these plasma-based creatures, that are just like part of reality. Like you said, we've only perceived such a tiny spectrum of reality. There's all kinds of things that exist outside our perception. An ant has a very different perception than a human being of reality. It's much smaller kind of bandwidth of perception. So I started noticing that I'd see people's guides, which was something like the first time I ever saw like a guide. I was working with this woman who was also a healer. And all of a sudden I saw at her head this big Native American fellow in a loincloth and a feather, like one feather. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, I see an Indian with you. And she's like, oh yeah, the great big fella. He came back with me from Arizona. I was like, oh my God. All right. So I got like correlation between what I was seeing and her own experience of it. And I remember just being like, wow, I can't believe I can see that. But then I started seeing things that looked like leeches, or and they had little teeth like this, and they like kind of like latch on. And they'd be anywhere from like a few inches long to like, some of them could get pretty big, right? And there were other things too that like maybe were a little more humanoid. And at first it really kind of freaked me out. And I was like, I don't want to deal with this stuff, and people's like dead relatives were coming to me too. And I'd be like, wow, your dad who just died is here. And he's saying to you, what the heck are you doing now? She's like, that's exactly the sort of thing my dad would say if he saw me getting tuning fork healing. So that just kind of blew my mind, because I'm very skeptical, Matt. I'm such a skeptic. It used to drive my family crazy. Like, my mom would be like, can't tell that child anything. She's got to figure it out for herself, because I just question everything, right? So I'm skeptical about this perception, but then I just kind of keep seeing it over and over again. So what I realized was that all I needed to do was shift the field so that the place and like seal up the attachment point and be like, okay, well, you keep fighting with your husband and, all of this arguing and yelling, like you've got this whole bleh going on here. Like, let's just start to train your body to not come out over there. It's like you've got this stray dog that keeps showing up and like, stop putting out food. Like, that's the solution. Like, you make the dog or the cat, the thing you don't want that's coming for food, stop putting the bowl out, right? And so I discovered that I could really get these things off of people by adjusting their field. I got to the point where I didn't even like see them anymore. I was just like, oh yeah, there's something there, but let's just adjust your field and it'll go away. Nothing that doesn't have a body can be stronger than those of us that have bodies. So any fear we have, whether it's a jinn or a demon or this or that, exactly what you said, like your connection to source, to God, the more you just fill yourself with light and you command those things away and you have faith and belief in your own power and your own inner illumination. White magic, if you will, just invoking the light of God is all that we need. That's all that we need. And that's our job is to become whole, to become healed, to become embodied, to become empowered. And then your ability to command these things becomes much greater. And honestly, like most people just have garden variety stuff on them, like leeches. Very, very few people end up with jinn or with demons or things like that. Like that's an extreme that doesn't happen to most people. But even, and there's a reason why this has been in the domain of religion and church and casting it out in the name of Jesus Christ, because it works. Because we're able to do that. But we don't even need to believe in Jesus Christ. Or, sometimes the word God is tricky for people. I think that I grew up in a non-religious home and I was educated in an atheist, mainstream education. And then I kind of fell into the New Age thing, right? And in the New Age religion, you're not allowed to say the word God. Like you say source or universe, right? But you don't say God. And it's only in the last couple of years that I've been like, you know what? Saying God feels way better in my body than saying source or universe, right? Do you feel how that's like universe versus God? Like this is a very embodied, empowering word. And there's been a whole lot of corruption around, well, what does that even mean? Well, it means the light of the world, like everything. It is the light, the love, the coherence, the integrity, the oneness of being. Like it's source or universe. This is the same thing, but God is a much more satisfying word to say. So when we are filled with the light of God, when we are saying yes to life, when we realize that we are worthy of taking care of ourselves so that we are a vital organism, right? If you're here, choose to be here and choose to be as vital as you possibly can be. You're worthy and you can do it. And the more that you invest in that, the healthier you're going to be all around. And these things they can't stick to you. They just don't stick because you're a viable, vital organism. As long as you're viable and vital and you keep feeding your own vitality, nature will not come in with forces that break you down.
Wow, that was incredible. Again, there's so many different ways I want to go. I just reminded of a few Bible quotes around this, and I was trying to find one specifically, and this came from the Law Summit. I really started to dive into the Bible. It's one of the books that, because I was raised Christian and learned about religions, a lot of it kind of put me off, but then coming full circle and doing a lot of the research, a lot of it's coming back to that exact book, which I've only read in bits and pieces throughout my life and it never really gave much credence to. And now that I'm reading it with these different eyes, I'm like, holy, this is really powerful book. And so one of them is like, I've given you dominion over the land, air, and water law, which is fascinating. But when I was trying to find that, I found another one that here it says, behold, I have given you the authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. And so it's interesting when we're looking at this from a spiritual lens. And that's what I think the Bible, going deeper in, and even if you look at any religions or any spiritual teachings, it's materialism versus spiritual, right? The seen versus the unseen, and understanding that. And so also what you said about God, I found that interesting too, going into the New Agey community. And I remember seeing some stuff around that saying like the New Age is kind of deceptive and all that. Now I can kind of see a lot of the deceptions that, it's just kind of leads you astray from something that might work better, right? It's a part of the learning curve and it's a part of the growth process. But yeah, source and universe and, the idea of like the Big Bang and all the kind of stuff like that, maybe it is, but I saw something the other day where it says science wants one miracle. I think Terence McKenna said that. They're just looking for one miracle, then we'll explain all this kind of other stuff. But where does that energy come from? That's, giving you that electric source, where does that come from? And the idea of God versus source or universe is just so much more powerful, and it's humbling. And I remember being younger, being like, I'm not giving my power over to this thing. Like I'm powerful, which is kind of egoic. But the idea was like, I didn't want to be subject to anything. I didn't want to be like lesser than. But then as I've gotten older, I realize how wonderful that is like, I want to be a part of creation. I am a part of God's creation. I'm created by that, and that energy is with me, and we're working together. Like, my love for my daughter, and the same thing, the creator to me, and to experience this realm, which apparently, if you look at a lot of these books, was given to us as stewards, right? And so you look at somebody who is high quality character, they're strong, they're kind, they're compassionate, they have good livelihood, they're people you want to be around, they're the people you call when you need some help with something, you know what I mean? They have patience, all these beautiful things. That to me is like a child or a person of God, where they're a steward of all things. They're not going around being the opposite of, how can I go take stuff? How do I, whatever I do doesn't matter. And that goes into materialism and atheism. And I saw another little clip the other day where this person goes around and says this example where if someone's going to offer you $1 million, and this woman comes up to you and she wants you to kill her husband, you put a droplet in there and they'll pay you $1 million. You'll never get caught, right? He's not a very good guy, but he'll just kill him. Everybody says yes, 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 and they're all going to take this money. And I'm like, holy, that's a lot of people saying yes. And the people who said no, he goes, why do you say no? And it really boiled down to a belief in God, which is a really fascinating thing. So as we push over towards this darkness, and maybe that's where we'll go with this, because there's so many different ways I want to go. But we think about like the dark forces, like we're rediscovering a lot of old truth. And when you look at occultism and you look at Satanism and some of these dark energies, which they're aware of, and they use this kind of field of energy for a negative source. And another Bible quote I think is important. It says, God says, I haven't given you the spirit of fear, right? So when we see this fearful projection, we see a decaying of society, we see a lot of things to guard against and more hazards, right? Like, oh, that's a deception. Well, they want to do this and that's not freeing. How do you stay positive, or what's your view on the spiritual sense of like our direction when it just seems to kind of be getting darker? They talk about the good old days. Well, and that you look at Tartaria, you start to see moving sidewalks, and you look at the world's fairs, the majesty of this arc, and you just watch it decay, right? Like an old man, there's a video, old man walking through the streets of like these young kids now who have just been so indoctrinated, have no clue about anything, so it makes you feel sad, and it makes me, and I think others, fearful. Like, there's no way that this wins, right? There's no way that this cycle of darkness descends into complete chaos and it stays there. That is like a scary fear for me. So curious your thoughts on that.
Well, don't you, when you feel into your heart about it, don't you connect with the knowing that the light and love win?
Yes, but I forget with my brain sometimes.
I mean, I think all of my fellow light warriors, sound warriors, people who are here doing this work, there's a knowing that, darkness has no power over light. When I turn on the lights, I walk in a room and I turn on the lights, like, then it's light, and the darkness can't encroach on that. I think that, we see evidence all around. Just look at, like, to Tolkien, for example. Any really good story, it looks like dark is going to win. It really does. And then especially you get to a moment where you're like, shit, we're hosed. And then what happens? Then the miracle happens. Then the armies of light converge. Then the victory happens. So I think that in a lot of ways, like, life is for entertainment purposes, because if I don't have a body and I'm just hanging out with God in the light, well, I bet you that gets boring after a while, quite frankly. It's like, oh yeah, everything is like groovy, but I'm kind of bored, so I want to go have an adventure. I'm going to go pop down to earth and see what story's unfolding there right now. And so I think, one, we take it too seriously. Two, that contrast is absolutely necessary in 3D. I can't know the light unless I know the darkness. I can't know pleasure unless I know pain. I can't know love unless I know the absence of love, right? So I think that we're in a cycle of there is, in cymatics, right? So we talk about those somatic windows and how they're particular patterns. So in a basic cymatic experiment, you might have a Chladni plate, a flat black metal plate, and put some salt or some sand on it, and then you have a speaker underneath. And whatever frequency you direct into that equation, it's going to form a different pattern. So when you change the frequency, the old pattern spontaneously dissolves, and then a new pattern spontaneously arises. So I think that we're in this place where a number of things are happening. There is a tremendous amount of healing taking place currently in this realm. There are many people, teachers like myself, many people who've created many modalities. We've been through what's called fifth generation warfare, right? Like every generation for generations has been subjected to trauma. And so our generation, now we have this accumulated trauma that's in all of us. It's in the world around us. It's really a big fat mess at the moment. It's just a mess, like you said, and it's getting worse. It's degrading. Like every city, the quality of every city has gone downhill. The quality of people's mental and emotional health has gone downhill. We see that. But what we don't see so much is the people who are doing the healing work, who are getting clearer, stronger, closer to God, more connected with each other. There are many different tribes out there that are starting to come together. We're starting to wake up to the fact that we are light and that we are connected through the ether and that we're very powerful that when we're connected. So even in the dissolution of the old pattern of the old world up to this point, even in that chaos, there is a new pattern in the process of arising. And I call us the karmic cleanup crew. But if you think about the turning of the ages in the Vedas, right? And the different ages like the Kali Yuga and the golden age. And then we go away from the great central sun and then we end up in the dark ages. And then we kind of start to go back and things go on the upswing. Well, when we've been going through these dark times, these last generations, there's been a lot of accumulated karma that my work, my Biofield tuning work, and certainly other methods out there, even something like family constellation therapy, is helping people to digest, to integrate, and to clean up the karma that has been created. So even though we don't see it, people are getting more whole, healthier, more filled with God, more light than at any time. Like certainly my parents' generation, they didn't do, I'm like, did anybody's parents do the work, this work of healing? No, my parents, it was like 5 o'clock was drinking time. That was their therapy. I remember my dad watching this program once and it had like Tony Robbins and Wayne Dyer and Marianne Williamson, all these people like in the 80s who were talking this language of healing and holing. And my dad looking, he was born in 1919. He's like, these people are all nuts. Like he couldn't even grasp what was going on, right? Whereas now my generation, your generation, like healing is happening. It is happening. And so we're sort of seeing this divergence, right? With the people that are going more towards the light and they are getting lighter and they are connecting with each other. And then the people that are going more into the darkness and the decay. So there is a splitting happening here. And I personally, it's always very easy for me to rest in the knowing that, well, one, it's just a little adventure we're all on, we're all just putting on a human suit and playing this game. Because it keeps us entertained. and we don't need to take it so seriously that even these people who appear to be of the devil are still made from light. And I can't become a protagonist unless you're acting like an antagonist, right? I can't realize the God in me unless you're whatever role you're playing, right? Look at all the people who emerged out of nowhere when COVID happened, all these warriors for truth who were like willing to risk everything in order to show up and speak the truth because they were inwardly compelled to do that. They would not have had the opportunity to be the protagonist if forces were not antagonistic. right? So I think that we're in the middle of an incredible story that's unfolding. And I think it really is about the return of Christ consciousness to us as individuals, where we wake up to the light within us. And this idea that our body has an electrical system and that the light within you is biological and spiritual is a big part of this awakening, where you're like, wow, I really am a being of light. Light can't be created or destroyed. And that I am directly fed from God, him and herself, right? God has feminine aspect and a masculine aspect. And that is where all of my good feelings, everything, my health, everything comes from that.
I love that perspective. And I totally agree that the events of the last couple of years has woken more people up. You look at somebody who wants a big change in their life, and often they won't change until a major thing happens. They get fired from their job, a big health scare, and then they think, oh my goodness, I better make a change, right? We're in this comfortable spot. And what it's done is it's given up the people the opportunity to wake up. And a lot of people have woken up and they start to reimagine everything. They have to break down the conditioning and programming that they've had, that they've never questioned. And we're getting more and more opportunity to do so. And the people who are not willing to look at that just yet, they're continuing down this darker path of just ignorance. They're not looking at another thing that's really knocking on the door for them to say, hey, it could be like, just take health as a really simple example, right? You're eating really bad, you're gaining weight, now you got a heart problem, you're starting to feel lethargic, and then all of a sudden you get a little tiny heart attack, and it's like, yo, I'm knocking at the door, bud. You need to start changing your diet, exercising, not stressing yourself out. Well, we've got this whole spiritual aspect of ourselves, of what it means to be alive and who we are and what we came here to do and who we came here to be, and how we came to experience this world. And you have to reimagine everything. How do you make your living? What's most important to you? What kind of people do you want to be around? What things do you want to learn? And how do you want to develop your connection with God? And I feel like that's one of the main things here, is that when we're broken down to nothing, often that's when people will go to God. And I've given this question to people recently, and I say, if you're driving your car and all of a sudden, you're going across and you hit some ice and you're about to fling off a bridge, right? So boom, you've hit the barrier of the bridge, you're flying off, and it's like 200 feet down to water and bricks, and you are basically toast. Who do you pray to? Where does your brain go? And everyone I've asked so far, I haven't asked, tons and tons of people, but everyone I've asked, they pray to God or Jesus, one of the two. Even I don't know other religions that might pray to something else, but it's God essentially. And I find that's a fascinating thing. So it takes us to our death, and that's why near-death experiences are very powerful and very transformative for people. And so the one thing that this has done is really pushed people toward God, and this understanding that there is a spiritual connection here, and that's a very beautiful thing. And the question I want to ask, if you want to comment on that, I'd love to hear it. But the question I was curious about, and for me, I'm trying to refine, is, peace for me, and what I'd like most is a direct, strong connection with God, and to do God's work here on the planet. And that's something I've journaled a lot about, and I've focused a lot in my life, is like, God, what will you have me do? And have this balance of service with also joy and living and growth and all the challenges of being alive. And to me, if you have a strong relationship with God, you can endure anything. I can't think of anything more beautiful, more profound, more important than having a relationship, a connection, a knowing with that divine force, that divine energy. And I'm curious, in your work, how would you recommend people, if they're hearing you and they want to heal from all these mental, emotional traumas that we have, right? Not being good enough, imposter syndrome, not confusion, victimhood. How can we use this technology for that? And then how do we use it for connecting and having a direct and powerful relationship with God?
Well, what gets in the way of us having that relationship is noise in our signal. Because we're antennas. And it is through our own electromagnetic antenna that we tune in to God. And so if you've had a lot of trauma response, a lot of ancestral trauma, if you've had accidents, injuries, you've got a lot of noise in your signal. If you suffered mental, physical, emotional, sexual abuse, which most of us have to some degree or another, it's very hard to know what, to really know that you're connected to God, because you have other voices in your head, because you have self-doubt, because you have uncertainty, right? You've got signal jammers. We're all really loaded up with signal jammers. And so what my work does is it helps get the noise out of the signal. We're essentially self-tuning instruments. And so all I do with a tuning fork is move it through your field until I hit a place where there's noise and resistance. And that's a place where you're just jammed up inside. I just stay there, reflect that back to the body, and the body uses that reflection to basically tune itself, to relax the tension and to move back into a state of flow. So the more clear our own signal becomes, it's the much easier it is to attune to the God channel and know, right? That our knowing comes in. I talk about how in my first book, I talk about this idea called the mail slot, MAIL slot. Now, in this mail slot in the back of my head, right at my atlas, and how when I was discovering in the biofield, the way that I mapped the biofield is that I would hit a distortion and a little note would drop in my mail slot, like a little Post-it note. And it would say something like, sadness, age 13. And so I would say to the person I was working with, I'm like, did something really sad happen when you were 13? And they were like, oh yeah, this is my grandmother died and I love her so much and we never talked about it and I still get sad thinking about her. Right? And so what I found was that these notes that came in my mail slot were all trustworthy and they all had correlation. And it was through this process that I mapped the biofield. I was at a conference in 2014, and this woman named Tiffany Barsotti, who's a good friend of mine now, but I didn't know her then. And she had this slide up, and it was about the Alta Major, which is a minor chakra, which is right there at the Atlas, which is also known as the mouth of God or the word of God. And I was like, that's my mail slot. So that just for some people, just having this idea that there's like a little, place right there where that information can come in. Now there's different ways. So I see God as the masculine and feminine. So the masculine is more electric. It's more thoughts, like God, the masculine God speaks to me in words. Whereas the feminine aspect of God is more magnetic. It's more coming up from the earth. That moves me in my body. So I might get messages one way or the other. The movement in my body doesn't necessarily come with words. It's feelings. It's like I get invited to be a speaker at this particular event, and my body goes, yes. God doesn't necessarily drop in and go, you need to go to this one, right? But then there are other things like what I told you about my prime directive that needed words with it. That was Father God giving me language and very clear instructions. And then Mother God moving me in that direction. So I think sometimes it can be helpful to understand that these messages can come in through our thoughts or through our feelings. And that the more we're able to really discern that signal from the noise, that we're going to be able to be in that. And I also find as a speaker and a teacher, that it's really important for me to keep my vibe as clean as I can, right? And this sort of dawned on me a few years ago. I'm like, wow, I can only think God's thoughts. I can only feel God's feelings. That's the aim, right? To get to that place of such purity where the ego firewall, the insecurities, the pain body is not what I'm experiencing or what I'm sharing, but rather I become a clear channel as much as I possibly can of the truth of the light and the love of God. So I think everybody can get there, but some of us need help getting the noise out of the signal. And this work that we do with tuning forks really helps to do that.
When you talk about that, like removing the distortion, it makes me think about germ theory versus terrain theory, right? And germ theory is saying there's these infinite things that can make you sick, so you're outside for 2 seconds in the cold weather, which is like available to all Canadians all the time. So you're gonna get sick, or this little tiny germ is gonna take you down, when you have this perfect miraculous body. Where terrain theory says if the body is being fed as it should, and it's in its natural state, and you're not harming it, you're not doing a lot of toxins, you're not doing all the stuff that disrupts it, you should be able to heal yourself. So if you've gotten so bad to have a cancer or something like that, well, what caused that? And you really look at your lifestyle, you look at your trauma, you look at your diet, you look at your exercise, and you bring the body into harmony the best way you can with strong knowledge, with the person who knows what foods you should be eating that are going to be powerful. And this actually reminds me again of Dr. Henry Morse, who was on my podcast a long time ago, and he's really well known for helping people with tumors and all these different things, very serious illnesses, heal, right? Cancers and stuff. I go, okay, well, I asked him, if someone's just going to die immediately, they're about to die in 1 second, what do you do? And he goes, 40 days of grapes, which are very alkaline. Right. And he goes, that will, reset the body and, help them, the body do what it needs to do to kind of get rid of these parasites. So getting rid of the distortions. And I think a lot of times when we're trying to healing, we're adding on, we're trying to add all these things where we need to flip it and think, what do we need to let go of? What habits are we not, that no longer serve us, and thinking it from a different angle. And so when an individual, let's say they want to participate in something like this, do they need a practitioner? Is there something that they can do on their own to kind of get themselves into a harmonic state? So one of the things that I do is I have those perfect chimes over there, that beautiful sound, and I have essential oils. And so I don't always remember to do this, but recently, because I want to be in this state, and I love when you shared the idea of like thinking God's thoughts, what would God be thinking? How can I act in that power? Because what I've been realizing every day is that, God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but also shame, guilt, all these different things. We can choose these higher level thoughts and these ways of being in each and every moment. We got to remember that. So, using that perfect sound, and then something that smells harmonic, right? So if you smell, a garbage dump, and then you have pots and pans ringing, it's going to be very disruptive to your signal. You're not going to be receiving any kind of information. So what can we do to put ourselves in a harmonic state? So question is, how do we do this? Do we need a practitioner? And what are the applications? Like, how far can this go for us? Healing traumas to experiencing our highest peak performance, connected, integrated way of being.
Well, we can't underestimate the power of our own voices and the things that we say. A lot of people get super concerned about what they're putting in their mouth, and they can get really neurotic about eating clean, but that's adding tension into your system. And remember, most issues are tension based. So if you're tense about eating this or not eating that, you're not really helping yourself with food, right? I practice what I call moderate hedonism. Like, I like all the things that are supposedly bad for you, and I have always enjoyed stuff like that. And really, it's medicine in the right amount, and then it's poison in the wrong amount. So we can't look to things like coffee or chocolate or cocktails or cigarette or cannabis or anything like that and be like, bad, 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 bad. Because all of it is good in the right amounts, in the right time, in the right way, right? So relaxing and not being like, I have to eat 100% clean, or making all these tense rules for yourself, right? Just even becoming aware when you're getting tense and being like, oh, I'm tense. Like, what I could do to relax? I need to take a breath. I need to drop my shoulders. I need to just relax. Because the moment I become tense, I put restriction into my system. My voltage isn't flowing. My current's going to drop. So breath is another thing. We get most of our electric juice from our breath. A lot of cancer happens in an anaerobic environment. These places where, oh, I'm not going there with my thoughts or my feelings or my consciousness or my breath. So that is a big part of what gives rise to cancer. So relaxing, breathing, becoming mindful of what you're saying, because your word is creative. Now, I never forget, I had this woman come to one of my Biofield tuning classes years ago, and she said, I have Hashimoto's disease. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, who is Hashimoto? Why do you have his disease? And why are you saying that? I was like, do you realize what you're doing? You're speaking this nonsense into reality. You're owning this and creating this reality by saying it. I was like, what you have is a low voltage and because you're not taking care of yourself properly. You're not expressing your emotions. You're not speaking truth. You're not standing up for yourself. You're saying yes when you mean no. You're doing all the wrong things. You're not taking care of yourself properly and you're bound up and exhausted. That's what you really have going on. Poor self-care. Right? And so she was like, whoa, like that really, and the next time I saw her months later, she looked like a totally different person. She stopped saying that. She started speaking health. She started taking care of herself. She started raising her voltage. She took responsibility for her own choices. Right? We all have the freedom to do that. Nobody's going to fix you but you. We've been so trained to worship false idols. It was like, this pill will save me. This doctor, this teacher, this program, this little device is going to protect me from electromagnetic fields. Bullshit. The only thing that is going to heal you is you and your relationship with God. That's it. Anything else is a false idol. And it is by our word that we create our life. So what are you saying and how can you speak yourself into health, into prosperity? There's always a little gap, but if you keep speaking there's this great quote that people always like to hear, allegedly attributed to Jesus, but channeled by a fellow by the name of Charles Capp, who wrote a book called The Tongue, A Creative Force. And the quote goes, I have told my people they can have what they say, but my people keep saying what they have. I'll say it again. I have told my people they can have what they say, but my people keep saying what they have. Our word is creative. Pay attention to what you're saying. Don't let blah, 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 come out because that's going to be your life. Words, power, and sound. You don't even need tools. Tuning forks are helpful. Chimes are helpful. Bells are useful. Crystal bowls are useful. But ultimately, your own voice is the most powerful thing that you have. And there's a reason why we do mantra and chanting and toning and singing, because all of it gets electric current moving through your body, right? In the beginning was the word. I mean, this is the whole creation itself. We are sub-creators with our own word, right? So all that said, right? But then also, like, I've created a number of audio recordings. One of them is I have a handful of free ones, and one of them is 144 strand activation. That's at my website, biofieldtuningstore.com. And many people claim that if they start to lose touch with God and they listen to that recording, it plugs them back in again. So there's one free resource. And then there's a handful of others. And then I have dozens and dozens and dozens of other recordings that are really pretty affordable for people to listen to that help get the noise out of the signal. You can just buy a tuning fork, a 528 hertz tuning fork, and just meditate with it. Even that, something simple like that, it's kind of like what you're doing with your chimes. And then you can also practice biofield tuning on yourself. And I do have, I have a program on my website called Tune Yourself in Health that shows you how to use tuning forks on yourself in that way. So there's some things.
Again, I love all that. And I love when you said the only thing that really matters, and you might have said a little differently, is, our relationship to God. And I feel like somebody who is speaking that, it's true for me, because this is a realization that I've had every day. And I had Daniel Krenzel on a few episodes ago, and he does something called the God Walk. And I've been doing that because it was such a simple thing. You go on a walk, I've done prayer and I've done meditation. I've done, if it exists, I've probably done it. You know what I mean? If I knew you were down the road, I'm going to show up there. I'm going to experience all of it just to figure out how well it works. And, what it does for me, so then I can either share it or learn something from it or grow ideally. And that's the whole point. And doing these God walks has just been like, oh, well, it's just this carved out space between me and God, and that's the thing that, prayers go, but it's like, no, you get your ass out of the house, you're going and you're going to go have this visit. And it's the most important visit you could have each and every day. And it's a really beautiful one. And when you're talking about our word being our creation, I feel like one thing that I struggle with is complaining or saying things as they are. And then knowing this, but kind of needing to remember, oh, well, when I complain, it's not good because I'm definitely adding to that and it's not helpful. and not speaking into existence what I want. And then in the past, a lot of my work as a coach, and especially an athletic coach, is we would create the audios and the hypnosis or the recordings for what we want to do. And it always has incredible results. So the question that I've been kind of curious about lately is that when we're, let's say, using affirmations or using something like hypnosis or praying for what we want, how do we make sure that we're praying and receiving it through the power of God and not ourselves? And that's been my little inkling of revisiting this again. Is like, oh, I'm not, it's all things are powerful through God, I as the vessel. So I'm just curious if you have a distinction on that, or it's like, I am the all powerful, I law of attraction this, and here comes the money. And I have, a story from my book of someone who manifested a lot of money, but this guy was a clear channel. He'd spent 100 days in meditation before I came out, and he was never coming out until he had a direct relationship with God, essentially, long story short. And so he's like, it just so happened to be 100 days, is meditating all day, every day, became a clear channel. And he goes, I wanted to test it. So I asked for money, and he goes, I had money. It wasn't because I wanted more or whatever. It's just, it was something physical and tangible that I could see would change. And so it was measurable, right? It was an easy measurable thing. So it had been successful so quick. And I believe, and this is, I'll go into it because I think it makes sense. My thought of why this worked was because I asked him after he did this, what changed? And he goes, when I walk, I walk. When I drive, I drive. When I eat, I eat. So we ask God for what we want, right? And we drop that into like an open pond that just spreads out for eternity. And that pond goes in as the request. God, may I have this beautiful home for this? Okay, great. Boom. Goes in. Immediately, you start dropping down thousands of other thoughts. They estimate 70 to 90,000 thoughts a day. So that's like rain distorting your signal immediately. Then we immediately, most people anyway, you go, oh, I'll never get that. Boom. So you got a 100-pound boulder of a resonant signal of a request. And then you got all these distorted thoughts of random crap you're thinking about, most of them probably fear and anxiety and old trauma, past, future, whatever. Then you got the negative one. So it just distorts the crap out of the signal. How was God supposed to respond to that? Because he is not getting a clear message of the request. So when he said it worked, it made so much sense to me. And this is what clicked in my brain. He just went, boop, dropped it. His brain didn't go, because he just spent 100 days in meditation, was never coming out. His brain didn't go into immediate thoughts, or I can't have that, because one of the things he learned in this book he gave me, and I got to remember the name of the book, and I've been trying to find, I want to reread it. It's a story about this guy who dies, and he goes through 6 or 7 angels. And if somebody knows this good, please email me directly. I'm trying to find it. It's Matt at Zen Athlete. He goes through, and these 7 angels, he has to go through this death process, right? At the end of the book, he comes back to life, right? And basically the idea was, you're worthy. So he goes, and he had this life, and the family and all the struggles that we all have, right? And he just goes, and because he wasn't near where he was, he had to go get a hotel room, and he just got a nice one. It was just such a simple thing. It was like, it's okay to have, just go get the nice one. You're provided for. It's like my daughter. I'm going to provide for her. I love her unconditionally. That's what we have. Now, if she chooses in her teenage years to go do some crazy stuff, and I can't support her, and she wants to go through and do all this struggle and not allow me to help, it's like us not allowing, the help of God. And so could you reply to my rant, please?
Yeah, there's a lot there. Well, one thing as far as prayer goes, I think that we tend to get really stuck in our head about words, right? But feelings, like anything that we think we want, like, oh, I want that beautiful home. Well, why do you want that beautiful home? Well, because it's going to make you feel a particular way. I want that new car. Why? Because it's going to make you feel better than driving around your crappy old car, right? The fact of the matter is that you can generate those feelings without the stuff. And so manifestation is really about the experience we want to have, but we can give ourselves that experience without the outside stuff. So if I think that winning the lottery is going to make me feel abundant and free, well, I can just feel abundant and free. And the more that I feel abundant and free, then that's going to continue to be my experience. I used to be very trapped in debt and poverty consciousness. I had a terrible relationship with money. I was terrified of it. It was like a hot potato. Anytime I got it, I had to get rid of it. I had all these thoughts and beliefs that it was bad, that it was unspiritual, that it was, money was not my friend at all. And I didn't have a good relationship with money. and I wasn't abundant. And then anytime I had to like, well, my crappy old car I needed a repair, and it was just exactly however extra I happened to have in my bank account at that moment, right? And I'd write a check and I'd be like, and then it started to dawn on me that abundance is a feeling, and it is a feeling of freedom. It's a feeling of freedom. And as soon as I started to open up to that feeling of freedom and started to feel more abundant, and I didn't get all like pulley-inny when I had to shell out money, then my life started to change and became more abundant because I was living the experience of abundance. And then my life arranged itself in that way. If we want anything, it's usually because it's going to make us feel a certain way. Well, you've got the power with your amazing human mind to make yourself feel that way. There was another time back when I was very poor for a long time. My husband was hit by a drunk driver, and we went into a hole that took 11 years to dig out of. And there were a lot of hard lessons in that. But I read something, and sometimes when you have a crappy old car, you don't keep it clean, you don't care if there's stuff in it, you don't respect it like you would if you had a Bugatti all of a sudden, And so I read that you need to like treat the car that you got like the car that you want. And as soon as I started doing that, and it was really only a few weeks, I amazingly like got an opportunity to get a better new car. Same with if you don't like your job, we'll start being the person that you want to be and doing the work that you want to do, like in the job that you're in. Start making yourself feel the way you want to feel. And then that's going to change. All we really have is our own inner experience. And we all have the power. And that's a big part of what Joe Dispenza teaches. Now, is it easy? No. Does it take practice? Yes. But you get better and better and better at it. And the more clear you become, and the more that you do what you say you're going to. So if I say, Matt, I'm going to meet you at 5, I'm here at 5. Right? If I say anything, if I say, yeah, I'm going to do that. The more that I do what I say I'm going to do, the more power my word has. So it's really important that we listen to our conscience, right? Our conscience is the urge of nature to keep us healthy, to keep us in right relationship with nature, with the cosmos. Everybody gets the cues dropped that said that like, do this is the right thing to do. And we can exercise free won't. I'm gonna be like, no, I'm not going to the gym today. I'm gonna,
Never heard that one.
Have 3 cinnamon buns instead. Like you can do that. But the more that we honor God's word, the more God honors our word. We enter into a relationship where we're speaking truth to each other. Like, I want this, God wants that for me. Boom, there it is. Right? So it's not as hard as people think that it is. As your friend noticed, he was very calm. He was very present. The more present you are, the clearer and calmer you are, the more gravity your word has, the more the words, power, and sound that emit from you work with the plasma and the ether to bring things into creation. And we become incredible manifestors. Although instead of manifesting abundance, I like the phrase materializing plenty. It's just more grounded, right? It's like, how can I materialize plenty? Well, I buy a little bag of seeds of arugula seeds, and they're tiny, tiny, and I put them in the ground. And just a few weeks later, I got plenty of arugula. I just materialized it because the world is abundant, right? So I think manifesting abundance is sort of in the clouds, but materializing plenty is something that as humans, we all have the capacity to do. Just don't make it so hard.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I feel like a lot of these things, they're not complicated, but sometimes they can be hard to apply, or you just forget. And if I didn't, know Tyrone, the person who did that personally, and I didn't get that story personally in a face-to-face experience and know him before he told that story, because there was something about him that we were doing had a little group of people, and we would ask these deep questions, kind of like we're doing now about life and God. And his answers were so freaking resonant as to how does this person know that? You can hear it in their voice that they know. And they're not trying to be special. There's answering truth, and it just smacks you like a 2x4 in the face. So knowing it's possible, and then building the understanding around it, where it's like, oh, well, my thought, I have, 100 pounds of request to God, and then I'm guarantee I'm putting 70 pounds of doubt into that sucker immediately. So how do I limit that, or how do I clear up my sin? And then I'm thinking all this other crazy stuff. So I'm not matching that. So understanding, okay, this is where I am now, and these are the things that I can work on to get that. And then I think there's also a very important distinction of being grateful for what you have now, and knowing that you're in abundance now is very similar to what you're talking about, of the feeling of what you want, the feeling of freedom, the feeling of abundance, the feeling of what you need. It's like, well, do you have all your needs met now? Can you be fully grateful for everything you have now, right now? Because if you can't, then the next thing isn't going to do it. And the next thing isn't going to do it. And the next thing isn't going to do it. And there's been enough guests on this podcast and around the world that have told you materialism and having everything you think you're going to get bring you happiness and joy and fulfillment it does not do it. That doesn't do it either. So they can be spiritually bankrupt having the materialism. And as you're struggling, maybe trying to get more security or safety or abundance or a safety net, or the big, more squirrel nuts, so you're going to make it over the winter. It's also this faith, because you don't know what it's going to be like in a month or a year or 2 years, but this constant fear of, will I have enough then? Well, somebody was reminding me of, again, another Bible verse was like, give us this day our daily bread, not tomorrow's and not yesterday's. And I was actually reading How to Win Friends and Influence People. He wrote another book, Dale Carnegie, How to Stop Worrying. And so I've been reading that, because How to Win Friends and Influence People is a phenomenal book. And so he says it in this one, he's like, day tight compartments, right? Because that's where anxiety and stress, they come from, thinking of the future. Depression is usually thinking about the past. Neither of those things are in the day. So powerfully living in the moment and in the day, connected to God, asking for what you need. Is like, wow, I'm indoors. I have all this beautiful day. Thank you. And I'd like to grow into this. So any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, no, that's exactly it. Gratitude, appreciation, the moment. I mean, that's what really the whole aim of sound healing is, to bring you into a relaxed, aware, present state in this moment, where you're not tripping out about the future, or not bumming out about the past, or, you're just here. And in this moment, usually everything is okay. I know for myself, what trips me out more than anything is I start thinking about the future and I spin out. It's very uncomfortable. So I'm just like, forget about it. I'm just going to stay in this now and really want whatever it is that God wants for me. I mean, I don't even really have like stuff I want at this point. I'm just like, I have all my needs are met. And and as far as prayer or connection, like, when I wake up in the morning, like first thing I wake up in the morning, and especially because I travel a lot, I always like tune in. I'm like, how easy it is to tune into and connect to God here, because there's certain places in the world where it's a lot easier than others, quite frankly. Right. So I'm always like waking up and always checking in with God. I'm like, I'm here. Good morning. And when I go to bed at night, it's always with checking in with this connection and gratitude. I mean, I'm way more gratitude to God than ask. There's very, very little that I ask for. But I spend a lot of time being grateful for what I have, say thank you 10,000 times a day. And the more that you're in gratitude and gratefulness, and like, I whatever it is you want me to think, whatever it is you want me to do, whatever you want me to have, or whoever you want me to talk to, I'm in service, and I rest in that. There's something very liberating about getting free from like, I want this and I need that, and can I please have this? And just be like, I think you're fucking awesome, and just tell me what I need to do today. And I'm in service. And that's an incredibly liberating place to get to, where you don't have needs or wants or demands or questions that you put out and then don't know if like there's a lot of noise in the signal. If you live and breathe and love God, your needs are met, because you see in any given moment, like, oh, here's the bread, here's what I need. Our resources are become at hand to us in any given moment for us to, and we wouldn't be sitting here. We've both been in pickles where we're like, well, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. But somehow we discovered that the resource was at hand for us to get over that hump or through that challenge or whatever. God always puts our resources at hand for us. And the more that we see that and we know that and we believe that, the quicker we find them, the faster we move through the game.
Absolutely. I love that. And I feel like that's a very powerful place for people to get to if they can, is complete service to God or creation. And it's one of my main prayers for a long time. Just show me what you want to do and be useful. And then I think there's the balance, at least in my life, of like, I do want to do certain things, like go snowboarding and get better. I strive to grow in certain things. And it's different than I was when I was a young man. I'm starting to get a little bit older now. But that idea of wanting to be of service and to be guided. And you said another thing that I think is important, where you said, show me what you want me to do today, not tomorrow. That's all we can do is that day say, you know what, I am available today. Because maybe being available today means talking to someone you know on the phone and hearing them out, or, being kind to somebody in the store, or whatever the case is. You don't know what that is. You're just saying, I'm here, I'm ready to show up. I don't know what that is, but I'm here. And I think that's very powerful, because you're not like, what can I get? Oh, I'll do your work once I have $40 million in the bank and I have everything sorted out forever. Then, you know what I mean? On Sundays at 10 to 2, I'll go to the soup kitchen. You know what I mean? It's you're not really getting the point from that perspective. And it's very liberating to be of complete service. And you do notice that there is a divine force, God, that helps you. And I've seen it many times in my life, because I've done logically very stupid things over and over again with no safety net, no resource, and somehow it works out. And it's too profound and random for it to be anything else. And it required me to make the leap. And I feel like that's important too, as these worlds are splitting. We're getting to choose. We choose God and service and creation and kindness and all those things that we know that resonate with us, that we've, our internal compass of what's right and wrong. We know what that is. We don't need to be told. We move towards that way, or we move the other way, and we get removed. And it's also you compromise your soul. You go punch a kid in the face as a little child, and you see him cry, you know it's bad. Something doesn't feel good, right? So you get hardened and hardened and hardened as you move towards the darkness. And so I feel like we have to have a difficult choice, because oh yeah, come on over here with God, you're gonna have everything taken care of, and here's your $1 billion house and everything you can imagine. It's like, come on in. It's like that person they're not authentically coming over. Everyone who's crossed that bridge and is genuinely of service, you resonate with it. You know that they had to cross the Rubicon themselves. No one can do it for them, and it's not guaranteed. Nobody gets a shiny bridge and it's super easy and you get a nice lift across, like, holy shit, here we go. You know what I mean? And then oh my God. It's like Indiana Jones when he has to step off and he's going to die, and he does the face step. That's what it is. And you're like, holy smokes. Wow, that's amazing. So
yeah, I bring up that metaphor a lot. I mean, that's how I live my life. I'm like, really? You want me to jump? Okay. I'm terrified, or I don't really want to, but that's where I'm being guided. And the net does appear. The steps do appear. The resources do appear. They really do. And maybe, we don't always when God asked me to be the one to bring the team forks out in the world, I was like, forget about it. No, I'm not doing that. I simply go through
no thanks.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, oh, you're right. Okay. Right? I definitely get mad at God and yell at God. I'm like, why are you giving me this lesson? God doesn't mind if I get mad at him. He doesn't mind if I yell at him. He knows. You know what I mean? It's okay for me to have fuss and be human and not like every task that I'm tasked with. But it's always made really clear to me, this is right. This is good. I know it doesn't seem like a gift right now, but it really is. So just you don't need to fuss. And I'm like, I'm fussing. But I always know, oh yeah, you're right. And I need to get over fussing, and God, and God doesn't judge me for my ego responses to what is asked of me. It's just always very present and loving, and just you'll come around to what I'm saying. And I always do, right? So it isn't always easy. It isn't always like going down a water slide. Like sometimes it's really hard, and it really pushes us to have to grow and overcome egoic programs that are hidden in us. Can be really uncomfortable sometimes. But if you follow that guidance, it's worth it. It's the right thing to do. It really is. We wouldn't be here as doing what we do, right, if we hadn't said yes over and over and over again.
Yes, absolutely. Well, this has been an amazing episode. I appreciate you. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone else did. Is there anything else that you'd like to chat about that you wish that I'd asked, or that you want to close the show with?
Well, I'll just close the show with some resources, right? So I've got a couple books. I've got Tuning the Human Biofield, which is my first book. I've got Electric Body, Electric Health, and they're both on Amazon and Audible. I've got a YouTube channel, and I've actually, God asked me the week before Christmas to please start showing up on Sundays and doing free talks and tunings. And I was like, absolutely not. My Sundays are precious. I'm never regular or predictable. I live very spontaneously. I was like, no, I'm absolutely not doing that. But then, of course, I started thinking about it. Like, okay. And then it turned out that the very first one I did was Christmas Day. I was like, oh, that, I was like, well, I already agreed to this. So it's Christmas Day and New Year's Day. And so last week I did episode 9. So every Sunday I show up at 10 a.m. Eastern and I talk about a topic. My first topic was, what is God? And I talked about my definition of God and why I use the word God, like what I was talking to you about earlier. And I was like, and I'm going to use the word God. So if you're a new age person and you're offended by this, you need to understand what I mean when I say this and why I'm using this word. And so every Sunday has a particular theme. So people can come check me out there on YouTube. And then biofieldtuning.com, you can learn all about Biofield Tuning, biofieldtuningstore.com, lots of tuning forks. That's where that free 144 strand meditation is, and other free things. So there's just a lot of resources that we've created that you can check out online.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you. I'll check out some of that myself. And that's it. Thanks everybody for watching.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everybody.
My pleasure. See you later.